With the release of the last hero of Year 3 comes a Wulin hero known as Zhanhu, or more colloquially pronounced in Chinese would be something more like Zhanhu, but considering my strong Western accent I probably butchered that as well, so I'll just stick to the more westernized pronunciation of Zhanhu. According to the For Honor wiki, Zhanhu means slaying tiger or possibly war tiger. If you put Zhanhu into Google Translate though, you will get war tiger, and since that sounds way cooler, I think I'm just going to stick with that. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, then you might be wondering why this video isn't titled For Honor Zhanhu Realism Analysis, and that's because it's not a full-on analysis like my other videos that I've done. For the most part, I don't feel particularly comfortable giving my analysis on the Wulin heroes, but that's a different discussion for a different time. In this video, I just want to talk about three things. One, I want to talk about Zhanhu's stances compared to what I know about longsword stances and just basic body mechanics in general. Two, I want to talk about his infamous forward dash light attack. Love it or hate it for gameplay reasons, a lot of people agree that it seems really wonky compared to the rest of his moves, but I want to see how unrealistic it actually is. And finally, 3, the moves from the trailer, which I have dubbed Sun Da's journey in regards to his commentary during the performance on The Path to Excellence. If you came here from Reddit, then you've probably already seen my attempt at the routine. If you haven't, don't worry, I'll show it again. And I'll also show some previous attempts and break it down step by step to show how simple yet complicated the entire routine is at the same time. Let's get started with the stances. When talking about the Zhanhu stances, let it be known that what I'm saying is not that he's doing anything incorrect. I don't practice Wing Chun or any sort of Chinese martial art at all, so before anyone goes in the comment section and tell me, "I've been mastering the ways of the Wulin for 9 years and you're wrong, Lamau," just know that my criticisms are based off of my logic and my thought process to how practical it would be in a real situation. That being said, his stances aren't that bad compared to some other heroes who look like they've never been taught how to stand in their entire life. Shaman. The only real problem I have with the Zhanhu stance is how they distribute their weight. You can see in the pictures that I have here from their side guards that they lean to one side or the other. They look like they have good weight distribution for the most part, but the problem is that they're facing the front of their body towards their enemy. Not just are they exposing a majority of their body as a target, they're naturally unbalanced with their body positioned that way. I'll explain more of this concept in the next section, but needless to say that it doesn't really matter because their entire stance will become null and void when they finally attack. One thing that I would like to commend the Zhanhu about is the stance looks an awful lot like the Warden's Flug stance, or better known as the Warden's side guards. The difference is that the Zhanhu actually uses these guards in a practical way and throws out stabbing attacks from the position of his sword pointing at the enemy. Personally, that alone makes me want to forgive Zhanhu's subpar footwork, although Warden's footwork is much better because of how he balances his front and back weight instead of side to side. But his side guards aren't the only thing the Zhanhu has in common with our resident longsword wielder. As you can see in this picture, his top guard looks like a form of ox guard. Again, I'm sorry I'm using a bunch of German longsword terms, that's what I'm really used to. If you saw my Warden analysis, then you know that the Warden for some reason uses key guard for his top guards, which makes no sense, and I suggest that he at least use ox guard, which would at least give him a point forward stance, but still able to throw a cut. Not just does the Zhanhu do this, but they're also able to throw a cut or a stab from this guard. This character is becoming more and more like a longsword wielder than the sword master himself. The only real complaint I have for the Zhanhu is a minor one, and that's that the feet are too close together which won't spread out their body weight, which means that they could easily topple over if pushed. At least in this stance though, one foot is forward and one foot is back, which should have better forwards and backward stability compared to his side guards. Speaking of forward and backward stability, that moves us into our next part to talk about the forward dash light. Now let's start with the footwork as it makes a great segue from the last part. The problem I had with the side guards was that the feet weren't planted front and back, and the problem I have with the top guard is that the feet were too close together. Both of these would affect form and power of any strike that Zhanhu decided to do, if they were to stay in that position, of course. If you can use the ability to stop time like I can, then you can clearly see that they end up using a position where it has feet front and back spread far enough to even out the balance, and they even have the goddamn feet angled properly for maximum stability. Remember how I said the previous stances would become null and void once strikes were incorporated? Why even go into that original stance if you're going to move into another stance that has better structure in the first place? Why not just start with the better stance? That way you have quicker, faster, and better strikes, and also you'll be better to retaliate if they were to hit you first. Regardless, if you want to learn more about footwork, I'd say watch the Warden analysis. I go more into it there. As for the footwork mid-strike, it's damn near impeccable. Any nitpicks that I could possibly find aren't really even worth mentioning. But no one other than Gladmanes are looking at the feat anyways. Most people want to know about the actual striking maneuver. How practical would it be just to tap someone with the sword like that? Well, let's quickly break down what's going on. If you watch the animation from the side, you'll see that there's a small chop rather than a stab. Now in a real fight, the chop may lead into a stab once the sword is pointed forward, but for the most part, the tip makes contact first with the initial rotation, then the Zhanhu just continues forward with a thrust by sheer forward momentum. But to really oversimplify it in the actual game, it's just a little hop and then a chop. Hop and chop. Now how realistic is a hit like that? Would someone actually get hurt by this in a sufficient amount? Would someone actually attempt this in a fight? The answer, in my opinion, is yes to all of it. Realistically, quick, imperceptible jabs and slashes are how you're going to weaken or disable your opponent before you can go in for a debilitating blow. Of course, sometimes you can take out an opponent in a single tempo, but sometimes that's not an option. So quickly closing the gap to get in measure of your opponent, then striking them quickly in the wrist, arms, hands, or whatever you can get just to hurt them is definitely something that happens or has happened. In fencing though, particularly longsword, a lot of tournaments don't like that because they might deem a hit like that as insufficient or tippy, because most likely than not, if you're reaching a bit for the strike, then you aren't going to hit with the center of percussion. That's incredibly valid for longsword, and that's a whole different discussion for a different time, but for saber-like blades like katanas or the Chang Dao, they have a very strong tip presence that's more than capable enough to make out some serious cuts. In the footage I'm about to show you, you'll see that I make a quick chopping cut from out of measure with the furthest end of my blade. I even try it from what I attempt as a Zhanhu neutral position to show that you can move into the stance and still get enough power to do a significant amount of damage just with the tip of the blade. Granted, it's a water jug, and this is in no way a comparison to a human analog, but you can see here that it still makes a significant amount of damage for something so quick and impromptu. Let's say, hypothetically, it does a fourth of that damage to someone's wrist or hand. I don't think that person is going to be shaking that off so easily. And if this opponent were using a two-handed weapon as well and one of their hands were rendered unusable, then the fight is going to be ending very soon for said person. I could say more about this topic and even more about the rest of this character's kit, but I wanted to make this a shorter video than usual. I think this is probably one of the more interesting moves in the entire game. I think I've made my opinion clear on this point, so let's move on to the last section. Here we are, last part of the video, where I talk about Sun Da's journey, as I've so endearingly called it. I attempt to recreate the techniques from the Zhanhu reveal trailer. You may have most likely already seen it, but for those who haven't, or for those who want to see it again, I'm just going to let it play real quick.
Excellence is a journey where the weak lurk in shadows. Yet my blade burns stronger. One by one, I smother them. I reap their flames. Let them fear me.
So I definitely tried the best I could. If you have been on the channel before, you know that I don't have my own backyard, so I have to borrow relatives. That means I only have one day to get everything right. The worst part about this situation is I didn't have all the materials I need, because why the hell would one person need 4 cutting stands? So I thought I'd be able to do it with some scrap wood that I already had. Didn't work, so I had to go to Home Depot and grab some wood, make 3 extra impromptu stands, and then start practicing. I watched that freaking trailer so many times because there are so many goddamn jump cuts. The first time I watched it, I thought, oh yeah, I could totally do that. I think it'd be fun. But I never got the chance to test it until then. Once I had the stands, I could figure out my spacing, and then I could start cutting at them with no targets yet and using my synthetic longsword. The Chang Dao I have is very sharp, so I didn't trust myself to be doing all the spins and shit right off the bat until I knew that I could do it successfully. So once I was proficient at that, I did some non-target drills with a sharp sword to get the feeling of the weight. And then after that, I went into my favorite mentality of ain't nothing to it but to do it, and then just started trying to get it done. I then quickly realized that I had to get it perfect, otherwise I would expend 4 targets per trial, and I'd very quickly be running out of targets. This becomes a problem because there are several steps to the performance to get it to match the trailer. Here I'm going to explain the steps. Step 1, stand there. Sun Da stands in place for a bit in an almost at ease position, which makes step 2 slightly irritating. Step 2, raise sword to right ox. Again, German verbiage, just work with me here. So Sun Da goes at ease to right ox. Again, another thing rendered pointless that makes the next step slightly irritating. Step 3, leave right ox, then go into a weird almost right side Vomtog stance, just to immediately leave that stance to then do a rising uppercut. Why? Why all of this? I mean, probably to help reinforce fluidity to guard switching, I guess. But realistically, I think they did it to make him look more flashy for someone just cutting lanterns, but whatever. The next step is truly stupid though. Step 4. Pommel strike the lantern. Why? No, seriously, this one is actually why. Learning close quarters forms of combat like pommel striking and grappling against inanimate objects teaches you nothing. Again, most likely flashiness for flashiness' sake. Obviously, I didn't pommel strike my jug because 1, I am not a smooth brain, and 2, it'd just get knocked off and ruin the entire routine. Regardless, a very irritating part of the entire process because the rising uppercut from step 3 leads him back into right ox. That then begs the question, why not turn to the left to do your pommel strike since the momentum is already going that way? It's the first thing of many that really hinder the fluidity of this entire performance that really doesn't make it seem combat effective at all. I suppose it makes sense though, because this dude's out here fighting lamps while the rest of the Wulin are actually breaching castles and shit. Step 5. Now this is where the fun begins. I actually genuinely enjoyed this part. I will consider the next 2 jugs as this one step to simplify it, and because it was really easy if you know what you're doing. So easy, in fact, it makes step 6 hard. Before we move to that though, it's right side slash after pommel strike. In the original video of the routine of me, you could see the trailer video jump because I was, air quotes, impatient and I didn't wait for my metaphorical lantern to swing back to me. Really, when you break the whole thing down without any jump cuts, there's a whole lot of standing around and the whole thing could be sped up immensely by not being a showboat and actually training to use a sword. I know, I just have to keep telling myself it's a trailer for entertainment's sake, it's not supposed to be something that's realistic, but I mean, they do get a lot of things right, so it's kind of hard to not want to be overly analytical when they're already doing so well, but you know, that's just me. Sorry, back to the step. After the right side slash, continue momentum into an almost pirouette type state, and then proceed with your next strike also coming from the right side. Due to the nature of the original shot in the trailer, I didn't think much about body positioning or strike positioning, but when I showed this footage to my HEMA instructor, the one piece of advice he could give me is to lower my body more. Best way I could describe it is Kensei's power stance when he does his zone attack. Good advice for any sword users who might be wanting to try something like this. Again, this routine isn't perfect and that will show in step 6. Step 6. So why does step 5 make step 6 hard? Because my body, and I assume the body of any sane person, would just continue momentum into the right side strike instead of stopping mid-strike just to do a sword flourish like a pompous ass, pause after said pompous flourish, and then proceed to strike from the same side that you were initially slated to hit in the first place. But I made so long as you look cool, right? I'm just messing around. Regardless, stopping momentum and then trying to do said flourish was really a pain. You can see that he does a really deep figure 8 sword twirl, which in reality, the figure 8 is the easiest twirl to do, but after doing the entire routine, it is really hard to stop mid-spin, face your target, do a perfect figure 8 with a sword that at least in my case stands 5 feet tall, and then throw a cut afterwards. I really did try my best, but as you can see, I didn't go quite deep on my left side. I don't give a shit though, this was already complicated enough. I am proud of how on point I did this, and once I saw that the Sunda finishes by twirling his two-handed greatsword in one hand, I knew I was done. So that's basically it for this video. I had a lot of fun making this and a lot of fun researching about this, and I know that I bag on Zhanhu and some other characters in the game, but I really do like playing For Honor, and I think that this character has a really neat design, and I only bag on it because it's funny and it's my sense of humor. And because it's always fun to nitpick a few things every now and then for realism's sake. Anyways, if you're interested in a sword like this, stay tuned. I will have a review out for it at some point. It is only $200 and honestly it's worth every freaking penny. This thing is a beast. That being said, when I say it's razor sharp, that isn't a euphemism for being an okay edge. I literally mean it's so sharp that it has burrs from the grinder that are sharp enough to cut through my microfiber cloth and into my thumb, just from cleaning it. I suppose that would be considered a downside, but honestly it's still better than getting a dull brick like a lot of swords out on the market are. Also, I know I keep calling it a Chang Dao, but from where I bought it from, it is sold as a Miao Dao. That being said, they are literally the same weapon for the most part. And I'd like to state that the Chang Dao can loosely mean long saber, and the Sun Da doesn't use a saber at all. That is a completely straight blade, and more so, it looks like it has an edge where the spine of the sword should be, at which point it doesn't make it a Chang Dao at all, since it would be a double-edged sword at that point. So if Yubi gets to bend the rules a little bit, then I get to as well. Speaking of bending though, in up-close shots of Sun Da, it looks like the sword curves more like a saber. It's almost like Yubi wanted to go for the original historical design, but then everyone would make fun of him for having Kensei's sword. I mean, people are already making fun of him for Kensei similarities anyways, so I don't think they stopped much. Regardless, if you've made it to this point, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me because stuff like this takes a lot of time to put together in what little free time I have in my day-to-day life, but hearing from how much people like these kinds of videos, it really does put a smile on my face. So that being said, if you enjoyed the video, then a like would be appreciated, and if you like videos like this, then go ahead and subscribe. There's definitely a lot more For Honor content for me to cover, and sword stuff in general if you're into that. And with that being said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, 9 years of Wing Chun training that you're just absolutely dying to tell me, then go ahead and leave them down below. I do make an active effort to check all of them and even try to reply to the ones that weren't a reply. Again, one last thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.